Warhammer introduced me to my wife.
Welcome to the FTN show.
Hey everybody, welcome to Forge the Narrative. My name is Paul, your host. I'm joined tonight by Red Powell.
Hello.
And Adam Camilleri.
Very happy to be part of this wide world of Warhammer.
We are the Bell Lost Souls podcast. Got a very special episode this week. Going to have a segment with Mike Brandt from Games Workshop.
The Mike Brandt? Gosh.
Yeah, he tells us a little bit about what they're up to. We'll actually just jump into that. So I tell you what, let's just do that. Going to queue up this segment with Mike, and then we'll come back and we will jibber jabber about some orcs, about some cool hobby things we have coming up, and then what we're working on. See you in a minute.
See ya.
FTN is brought to you by Discount Games Inc. Please visit them at www.discountgamesinc.com. And don't forget to ask Jay about ways to save even more on your hobby projects.
Hey everybody, welcome to a very special vendor spotlight segment of Forge the Narrative. My name is Paul Murphy, your host. I'm joined this afternoon by Mike Brandt.
How's it going, Paul?
Mike, welcome to the show.
Oh, it's good to be here again. A bit of a different form than before, but same old us.
That's right, Mike Brandt from Games Workshop.
Yeah, I'm still getting used to the comfy feel of the new attire, but it's been an interesting few months joining Games Workshop. Really fascinating. It's a pretty exciting place to work. Especially for a lifelong hobbyist. But yeah, it's also good to be back on the show.
Well, you're probably in good company there with other lifelong hobbyists. Most people that I know of that work for the company also are a player in some capacity.
It's really hard to be around that IP and not fall in love with it. And I think a lot of people who are in love with the IP jump at the opportunity to join the company, which is a lot of what sort of drew me to join them and take over global events and also help out in the customer technology area of things. So yeah, it's been a good time.
Tell us what you're doing there now. I mean, I know you basically mentioned the headlines, but what's going on?
I have good timing. It was an interesting time to join a company to take over responsibility for all of their events around the world at a time when the world needs to do everything it can to avoid anything that would be risky, which is very similar to events. That said, there's a whole lot of planning and strategizing and very exciting stuff that we've been discussing and looking at for the world of events once the world gets back to a healthier and safer place. So there's a lot to be done on that, and I'm sure I'll save the details of that for the next time that we chat sometime in the safer future. But additionally, my background before coming to Games Workshop included some fairly senior work in a bunch of different IT firms, providing IT health services, solutions, transformation, etc. Companies like Lockheed and others. So it was a natural fit to sort of jump in and help out a little bit on the side of customer technology as well, which is a fancy word for all the different things that our customers interact with technologically. The Games Workshop store, Warhammer community, the whole works.
That's an interesting thing. So we know that, of course, the company makes figures and books and we buy that stuff or whatever, but there's a whole lot of infrastructure that brings it to us to be able to buy it. We just kind of take for granted.
Well, we live in a digital world these days. And the way that people consume things, the way that people engage, it's all much more integrated with technology than I think it ever was in the past. It's important to draw a fine line, I think, between retaining that sort of tactile, in-person, sociable, very physical hobby, while supplementing and enhancing people's ability to enjoy it with the wide world of technology and all the ever-changing, dynamic, interesting things that it provides.
I know I'm digging it. I know that I have seen Forge World kind of come back to life with new stuff on the website, new dice. I just got new dice. I won't tell you all the cool things that I fanboy over, but let's just say I got some Blood Angel dice. And
I'm right with you. I fanboy all the time. It's a fascinating thing, again, to like work for the company and also still be just an incredibly passionate fan of the stuff that the studios and everyone else puts out.
It's probably hard not to pick up a few extra kits, just because.
No comment.
That sounds cool. That sounds cool. Okay, so with the technology stuff and then the events, I mean, you said it perfectly. Is like this is just not the world is not conducive right now to running large-scale events, but you have to be kind of like setting your eyes on that. We will get back to normal. That part of our culture will come back again.
Absolutely.
What are you thinking about planning towards then? What can you share? I mean, I know it may be a little bit farther away, and there's probably some things you want to experiment on, and we can't right now. But like, can you give me any details?
Well, it's an interesting question because of where we're at in the world. It's very difficult to plan for a fixed date in time, for instance, because of how uncertain we all are about where we'll be at any future fixed date and time. But I do agree with you that we will get back to normal, probably better than normal. It's sort of in the nature of the human spirit. And when we reach that point, I think we'll all be jonesing for more Warhammer than ever before, and missing all of our friends and all of our compatriots and all of our folks that we always get to see at events, big and small, both in our local communities and at the big, massive events that are held all over the world. So I see, my role as including a couple of things to help make that event ecosystem around the world of Warhammer more exciting and more frequent and more fun and more engaging for everyone. I think that's not a job to go, run tournaments or anything like that. I mean, there's people who do that today, but it's more about, two different angles. One is going to big giant events like Gen Con and other places, sharing in that broader community and bringing Warhammer to more and more people, sort of raising the social and cultural awareness of it, if you will, so that people who maybe haven't heard of it are given a really easily accessible way to join in the hobby that has brought so much excitement, fun, friendship, and growth to lives like yours and mine. So more people being exposed to Warhammer and giving it a crack. And then, of course, there's engaging with the people who are already in love with it, but are looking for more and more ways to engage with it, to share it, to, find similar people with similar interests about the ways they like to engage with it. And so just sort of get people more excited and do everything I can to facilitate more ways for people to play more Warhammer more often.
Now, being, an old hat going to tournaments and that kind of stuff, I mean, I guess kind of expect certain things. We for the longest time, we expected 1850 games and then a big game 2,000 points. I mean, so that kind of stuff changes. Little bitty variations along the way. And so when big changes come down or seem like they may be coming down, we tense up a bit. But I think it's real easy for us to focus just on us and that. But there are lots of other people who may have never, they don't have anything to compare it to. They're just coming into this for the first time. And it seems like this edition is really taking some steps to encourage that and give them more accessible entries. Is that fair?
I think that's fair. I also think I'll say this is the first time you'll hear me use the word tournament, in that the idea of an event need not be too myopic or too focused on, competitive or tournament play. That's obviously an exciting and very energizing part of it. But there's a lot more than just 2,000 or 1,850 point tournaments. What size should we do when we do a GT? And I think making the hobby more accessible is a good thing. I also think events, by their nature, generate a lot of excitement. It's one thing to pick up a new game or a new hobby. It's another thing altogether to be exposed to a hobby that will genuinely enrich and improve and make your life more exciting. And I think Warhammer really does that. It's not just about tournaments, but events provide you that way to, dive deeper into the hobby.
For a bunch of us, I mean, that's our guys' weekend, or something. I mean, and I'm not limited to just guys. It's something that we could sell to our families. Hey, no, a bunch of us do this. What, you're crazy? No, like a lot of people, we all go to this thing and we convene and we play this game for 3 days.
You've kind of nailed it. And something I'm super passionate about. Warhammer introduced me to my wife. It introduced me to most of the guys who stood up for me at my wedding. It introduced me to some of my best friends, both local and abroad. And of course, it introduced me to even now my career. I'm not saying that experience is going to be the same for everyone. I'm not saying if you play in Warhammer events, you're going to meet your future wife. But it does provide you with this whole community that's really, really special, the Warhammer community, if you will. And I see a lot of my job as exposing more and more people to the opportunity to participate in that.
It sounds like, as events that is, again, it's not just going to be, or at least it probably won't be just competitive 2,000 point games. We're talking about all different kinds of spectrums of things.
Yeah, basically. The world will resume the world. But yeah, I think also a part of it is just creating an ecosystem in which it's easier and more frequent for people to host and start and foster events. Big, small, competitive, not competitive, hobby focused, narrative focused, match play focused. Because if today we have 1,000 tournaments around the world a month, in the area of no COVID, why not have 10,000 and another 10,000 really exciting hobby events alongside? And at each one of those, you have more and more people all over the world who can really consume and enjoy and experience that. So who knows how far it will go, how big it will get. But I see my job as helping foster that growth we've already seen of really exciting events all over the world.
Yeah, see what the support is out there, I guess, for some of these things. There's a host of specialist games and stuff like that don't seem to get a ton of attention. And I know it's a resource thing, but I'd love to see, maybe more of that structure around that kind of stuff.
It all sounds pretty exciting.
Yeah, I'm not fishing. I'm just more wish listing or kind of gushing with you here, I think, for a second. I'm
right there with you.
Well, I have friends that essentially run leagues, all the time of some of these things like Kill Team and things like that. There are people out there enjoying this hobby in a multitude of different ways, and conventions, like you mentioned, Gen Con and that kind of stuff is a way to, at the core of them, they bring a lot of like-minded people together to experience something that they all find neat.
Yes. And even when I first started participating in Warhammer myself, it was with new local friends at their house once a week. And it was only once I went to a local Games Workshop and played in a little one-day tournament that I started to see this broader world that was out there. And there's a lot of people that don't have those opportunities today, whether that's at Games Workshop and Warhammer stores, whether that's at local hobby stores. And so we could talk about big giant events, but something I do want to put a lot of my time to when the world is a safer place is seeing what ways I can foster more and more of those events being available so that people who are participant in the hobby today have opportunities, if it suits them, to sort of share that hobby and engage in that hobby with others, which is really the fundamental nature of what an event is. It's great for everyone when they do.
Yeah, nice, man. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. I'm chomping at the bit, but remaining as patient as I can be, given how important it is to look out for the welfare of everyone.
That's exactly right. And I know that I'm personally down some games of Warhammer 40k. I'm not playing as much because of the shortage of opportunities to do so.
Yeah, it's a challenge for sure.
But I am still playing, and I'm enjoying this edition.
Well, that's good.
It's a little different. Yeah, it's a little different. There are some differences that I think that start to manifest the more you play.
There are some of them are very sneaky too. Little subtleties involving the movement phase, involving the way that you move models and engage with things in combat, coherency. All those little things kind of create a very different game without, and I think it's quite elegant of the rules writers that they didn't throw the game on its head and release a whole bunch of new indexes and kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? They made some gentle and clever improvements that really made it a different playing experience with a whole sort of brand new meta to explore and discover. And I don't think the world has fully discovered it even yet, but it's still the same game, right? It's just better and different in some subtle and important ways.
We need the reps. We need the time with it, seeing all the intricacies of the moves and what's different about a charge and that kind of stuff. And look, you're not the rules folks at GW, so I'm just kind of expressing this, but I'll tie it back into events. Is that the changes, there are things there, do you find them more conducive to running structured and match play games? And if so, what are the things you find most
I think there are two blatant changes that I think affect events pretty directly. One is Crusade, and really full, deep support of a whole new system for narrative play, which ties into more and more resources that make it easier for folks to organize narratively driven events rather than tournament driven events. But in tournament play, we obviously have the GT 2020 pack, and even the number of events that are going on in safer areas of the world are almost exclusively all using the same sheet of music or the same mission pack. And that was achieved through a number of different activities. But really what's exciting about it is nothing could have been more of a change for events than seeing the vast majority of events all start to represent, a very similar play experience. So that people who invest in, building a really cool collection of miniatures, painting it up so it's gorgeous and ready to play with, can actually use that same army at more than one, event or event style. And it's really exciting to see people both be able to do that. And then as the wild west of a new meta evolves, see the discussion about it online and, the results from the handful of events that are happening be different every single week. So I think those two changes are pretty substantial as far as how they affect events. And we're even seeing it despite the pandemic.
Yeah, fair enough. Do you think that the time it takes to play this game is shrunk at all? Maybe would that allow like more rounds in match play events? And
there's so many ways to attack that question. I think for the most part, it's not been a whole lot faster yet because people are still learning a new game, all the new intricacies and changes. But I do think there are a lot of core fundamental changes that naturally make it quicker. It's quicker to roll up a mission. You're not doing deployments separate from a bunch of other activities. A lot of your pregame stuff is set before you walk up to the table. which is both more sort of, in my opinion, narratively fulfilling, i.e. the warlord who's famous for, his saga of the bear doesn't just have a different saga every 5 minutes. You don't have to go through a whole lot of back and forth on those psychic powers and everything else. So that's cleaner and more efficient. And there's also more formalized, smaller game sizes. So if you're not looking for that sort of 2.5 to 3.5 hour Strike Force experience, there's actually like missions bespoke designed for and support designed for playing the game in a smaller, more compact, more efficient way with Incursion Combat Patrol. So yeah, I think it will be faster. I think it can be faster right now, but I do think there's, a time will tell element as people get comfortable playing in a new environment and new rules and everything else.
Yeah, I like what you're saying there. I like the idea of the support, and that's one of the things that you guys have done a great job of, is actually supporting these things that are core concepts in the design. It's not just words in the rule book to fill a couple of pages. It seems to be supportive through articles, through engagement, on the streams, through things like this, and then of course the specialist games, which I'll be honest, I was a little bit skeptical of how much support is going to be there for Blood Bowl. I don't know, like 10 new teams or something. I mean, it's been ridiculous.
It's been really exciting. I'll do credit to the Rule Studio for this stuff. They had this vision, as I've heard them share it, of the 3 ways to play was I think the start of it, and we started to see that in prior editions. But now it is like a step to the next level where the rules are intrinsic to the ways to play and vice versa, as opposed to a little bit separate. There's a lot more support present. So, if you want a roadmap for how to play, match play or narrative or otherwise, it's much more cohesive and much more tied into the codexes that are coming out and to the core rules and to the mission packs and everything else. They all work together very seamlessly and very intentionally. And I think it also reflects, this is just my 2 cents, right? I don't write the rules. I just sort of enjoy them the same as everyone else does. It seems to me that there's a set of players out there and hobbyists, whether they are competitive focused or narrative focused or hobby focused, that are going, or all 3, that are going to do what they want. They'll leverage their imagination. They can make their, they've been making their own narrative campaign experiences for decades. People who've been inventing their own tournament formats with or without a format they liked from Games Workshop. But now, for the majority of people who I think appreciate having guidelines and roadmaps and connected rules that all tie together perfectly, or as close to perfectly as you can get, I think those players, which are probably the bulk, now have an increasingly connected and intrinsically tied together game. It's like the connective tissue is growing out in this edition in a way that it never has before. And for me, as a player, it's very exciting. And as an event organizer, it's super exciting because it makes putting on events just a more natural, intuitive thing to do that sort of naturally ties into the game itself.
I think we've all been in those conversations to where someone is talking about their homegrown campaign. They're part paladin, part lich, whatever. I'm not going to tell you about my character, but But yeah, when you're having that conversation, sometimes you feel, either you can't get into it with them or whatever, but now again, you were just talking about this Crusades thing. Now you've got all that connective tissue to where you can at least have a real conversation with them.
Yeah. And I don't want to knock that other way as a sidebar, that some of the best narrative events or event styles that I've ever seen, the players don't even have clear points they can earn for missions and things like that. There's GMs that, kind of keep that stuff hidden so there's a real battle experience where you don't, have a natural understanding of points earned for grabbing a certain rock on the battlefield at the right time. And so you can have kind of this very cool, immersive experience. I think you can do that even better leveraging the new rules for things like Crusade. But the point of the differentiation there is you always could do whatever you wanted. It's your game. But now you also have more guidelines that are connected deeply to the rules than ever before, where if you don't want to come up with everything from scratch, you have an awesome system to use for both tournaments and Crusade play.
Yeah, fair points. Those are types of things that there was back in the Games Day eras of things, there was always a club section, at least the ones that I attended, where the clubs would come and showcase their clubs. And they were often, I think, encouraged to create little mini games within games, using Warhammer figures.
Yeah, those were always awesome. Memorable, too, the terrain that they would put together and things like that. Actually, in my new role, I hope I'll be exposed to more and more similar such things as I explore the worlds of Warhammer globally in the future.
Yeah, I bet that's one of the neatest things, just seeing how, again, we have the internet, right? We can talk and see some of this stuff, and we get to see some of the things that other people in other countries are doing. But to really experience it, you're probably going to see under the hood on lots of things. It's going to be neat.
Yeah, I'll riff off that too. One thing I hope to be able to help the community do is become more cohesive globally. Even in just a short time that I've been with the company so far, I've had the privilege of talking with really passionate event organizers in Japan, in China, in Spain, in Italy, in Germany. I don't think sort of the UK and US worlds are quite as aware broadly as maybe they could be about how many passionate and talented and really excited events and event organizers and players and hobbyists there are everywhere in the world. And so, I'm sure there's some, cliche line I could put out about everyone in the world enjoying the worlds of Warhammer together. But basically, that's what I'd love to, again, help foster, is some future where everyone's just as tied into and keyed into and communicative with and engaged with, their fellow Warhammer slamming players over in Japan as they are with their buddies next door.
Yeah,
I get to see that.
I craft my feeds on Twitter and Instagram. It's all hobby folks, and it's with people retweeting things. You just see things, and it's kind of hard to fathom just how vast the hobby is. Again, because you're playing with the same. You may be playing your local game store or whatever, but I get asked, is like, what made you want to get out and do the tournaments originally? It's like, I wanted to test my mettle. Like, I wanted to see how good I was compared to somebody in another state or whatever. I don't even know.
I said that's interesting. My first reason for going to an event was I wanted to play more Warhammer and meet more people who played it.
Well, that became my reason for going to tournaments 5 minutes after I showed up at one.
Yeah.
Because you see, it's the buzz of everyone going around and setting up their army and getting, wanting to tell you, making sure their army list is right, doing their thing, doing their pregame rituals, having chants with their club or whatever, seeing people. This is the thing that it's like, you see people almost in like jerseys. There weren't jerseys back in the early days when I started going, but it was, same t-shirts, kind of thing.
Yep.
Like, wow, this is huge.
And there's an underpinning there of the importance of team events as well for fostering, like, you've got your friends who play a little bit, but one of the best ways you can get them even more excited about playing is, well, I need to get a couple other people to come with me to this team event, whether that's at Adepticon or someplace over in Europe or wherever. That's what got me into big events personally, is the excitement of me and 3 friends spending a year working on a beautiful, cohesive team army and going to Adepticon and playing their famous team tournament. I think that's a note about events that's worth always reminding folks of, is no matter what you hear about them, whether it's competitive, whether it's narrative, whatever, they're really ultimately social adventures that make your hobby more enriched and more exciting. Usually causes you to end up buying way too many armies or collections of plastic that I need to catch up on. But the real benefit of it is that you get together with more and more people who share your passions and interests, who like the same kinds of things, not just Warhammer, but sci-fi or fantasy or et cetera. And of course, the more you connect with people who have shared interests, the more that you become comfortable about those interests, the more you become excited about them, the more you delve into them, and the more complete you feel, I think, as a person enjoying and experiencing your hobbies and interests.
Well, one of the things that I mentioned to people that are like curious about running new events, like, should I run an event or whatever, and I kind of counsel them on the fact that it's up to them to craft the culture of whatever kind of event that they want to have. They're going to enjoy running, whatever they want to share with people that would be coming to attend them. Do you think with GW getting back into the mix of maybe putting these types of events on, do you think that independent organizers will still be empowered to inject their own culture, do their own thing?
Yeah, I come from a background as an independent organizer. My view of organizing events is that it's a service. So it's important to note that the only thing I would say philosophically I would try to encourage is, don't run an event for yourself. Don't run an event to make yourself popular or to try and make buddies. Do it as a service to your community, because the benefits that you reap from doing so are immense. You can make the world a little bit of a better place. Friendships will happen naturally, and you get to do really cool things for the folks in your community that you enjoy time with. I'd love to be able to help provide resource, philosophy, thoughts, concepts, articles, comments, information to help new organizers get started on the right foot. But, innovation happens when people are have some freedom to think for themselves and try new things. And I certainly wouldn't want all of the innovation that the event organizer community has achieved on their own over the last, 20, 30, 40 years to be halted. I'd rather that events enhance the ability of more and more and more people to run events if they'd like to. And through that, as we talked about earlier, if there are 1,000 events in a month, I'd rather there be 10,000. And that, it doesn't really matter who's running them. I'll never have the resource to run 10,000 events in a month. That's for sure. I don't have enough hours in my life. So the independent organizer community will always be the core horsepower provider for how many events are run. And for every really cool Adepticon or Nova or Gen Con, it's really exciting, or Warhammer Fest, there should be thousands of local RTTs and store events and things like that, are what create the community that allows those monolithic annual events to happen in the first place.
There you go. I know that we've changed gears just a little bit. This is a softball for you. So I know we talked about acquiring figures, which counts as hobby progress. That's okay. But are you working on anything?
I am. I'm currently painting up a bunch of Death Skull orcs. I actually had an orc speed freak army in 4th edition. And long story short, I don't want to get into it, but it was actually stolen. And I had 27 vehicles in it. And it was so cool. It was all fast. They all were very cohesive together. It was a really neat theme. It was a bunch of buggies, and it was, killicans, and it was trucks and wagons. And I hadn't, my heart hadn't been willing to commit to a new project in a long time. But for some reason, all those speed freaky buggies that were released a couple years ago.
Oh man, they're so cool.
Them. And so I finally bit the proverbial bullet and started a new project, and I'm painting up way too many sweet, cool little buggies and things like that.
Man, that's cool though, man. They're like canvases for all the orky stuff that you want to put on there.
Yes, and I'm not the best painter in the world, but I'm really trying to put my back into it because I got to compete against people on the community team like Eddie Eccles, who has a gorgeous orc army. So I feel like the gauntlet has been laid by the class and hobby skills that now surround me on my daily work life.
That dude can paint. He posts pictures to Twitter every now and then, and he's been featured in White Dwarf and on the community page, if I recall correctly. So he's not just a voice on camera. He's like a full on Renaissance hobbyist.
Yeah, Eddie is everything good about Warhammer in one awesome package.
That's pretty cool, man. So okay, orcs, how far along are you this? When can we see some work in progress shots?
We'll talk about that when I feel safe and comfortable sharing my work in progress. I have a lot of assembled gray. Okay,
that's okay.
I mean, we know what the color of Death Skull should be, so give it some time.
Okay, no, I'm right there with you. All right, of course, now with any opportunity to paint more Blood Angels, I'm going to take that. That's actually what we're taking to Adepticon. So, back when all this started, I kind of stopped my progress, and I've been with the edition hit and just trying to playing some games, and then realizing that my hobby time, even what I could be playing a game with, I can focus that into some hobby stuff. I can paint, I can build something else, I can do something for a friend or whatever. Just trying to stay in it.
Yeah, I was a little bit disappointed myself. I was going to be going with Pete Foley and some other folks, and Pete had built up this awesome Grey Knight army that was all converted, like intercessors and Grey Knights and aggressors and Grey Knights to make Grey Knight Terminators, and just looked really, really awesome. And we, of course, couldn't feel that either. But we'll be able to get back to all that stuff.
Sooner or later. That's it. So, I'm just trying to focus that time, because I want to spend, in my mind, I've got a mental budget of X amount of hours on 40K a week or whatever. So, can't roll some dice. Let's at least get some cooler looking figures on the table.
You got it.
Ready for when I can do that.
I'll be looking we'll roll some dice together at some point.
Oh, man, we definitely will. Mike, man, thanks a lot for taking time to come on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Paul. It was as awesome as ever. Feels like we haven't missed a beat. Can't wait to see you again in person.
Yeah, man. Hopefully I can have you on again sometime.
Yeah, say when.
All right, man. Have a great rest of your night.
You too, buddy.
You're listening to Forge the Narrative.
Hey, everybody. We are back. It's really cool to hear from Mike and GW Prime, as it were. Talking about some upcoming events, or the idea, the theory behind events.
Yeah, I like to talk about non-tournament events. I don't know about you guys when you guys were first getting into the hobby. Man, Games Day in Australia, in Victoria, when I was first getting into the hobby, it was such a huge deal. Like, you'd organize like a rental bus 3 months out and write down on a list who's going to be able to attend and all this stuff and all the crazy stuff you guys are going to put together to show off when you get there, to show that your store was really cool. And I miss that stuff. Maybe I miss it because of the rose-colored glasses of nostalgia, but I still think that's
no,
awesome.
man, they were cool. I mean, they were very cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those to where, that was the same thing. I was in a gaming club. We'd show up with our club project or whatever. And he's my oldest, but he was my son, my only son at the time, could kind of walk around and see some things that expand his, past just my collection of things, see all people enjoying the hobby. They had the paint and takes, they had the scenery building things. There were stuff that you just celebrated being in the hobby for a day.
Really?
Yeah. It's awesome.
It was really, really awesome. I can't get over how cool it was as a kid. I was in I was 10, 11, 12 years old. I only went to 2 games days, I think. And it was just such a cool experience. One of a kind.
Well, I mean, and not to take away anything away, some of the independent events, they have really brought that back and carried the torch when those things weren't happening. And I know depending on how they go down, it may not be the easiest thing to pull off. And especially going forward, with our current time, we don't know how easy or hard or whatever it's going to be to pull off. And during that time where those things didn't exist, there have been some other independent events that have recaptured some of that culture, which is nice. But I kind of think that, when GW is able to, or if they do start doing these things again, they're going to be great.
I agree. And when you're talking about things like Adepticon, who's shining that torch on the hobby, waving it proud for people.
Yeah. Adepticon is great. I mean, Adepticon is one of the highest examples of those things.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you take Adepticon there's narrative events at Adepticon, right?
Yeah.
And then there's the narrative events at Nova and everything. And I don't know if you guys have had a chance to read it yet. I was immediately attracted to it because the Necron Codex is on the front of it, but the recent White Dwarf that just released it's this new Flashpoint deal where they put a bunch of stories and then they essentially provided a framework to play a campaign like at your store or your local, with your friends or your gaming club or whatever. I mean, I thought it was pretty cool. I'm actually getting a Crusade deal ramped up in my local community, having a great time with a bunch of the guys, just especially with 9th edition and stepping up and how it goes from, it has 500-point formats, 1,000-point formats, but this Crusade deal that was introduced in this latest Flashpoint collection, there's all these little stories and stuff, and I think it's really awesome. The direction, if you get to read the White Dwarf before that, and then of course this one, they talk. Mike hit on it a lot in regards to these event things, but the White Dwarfs do a great job of showing where they're headed with 9th edition and how they're really getting player buy-in and a lot of this stuff. I mean, I think the Conor campaign that they did back in 8th edition, where people could report up by stores and stuff like that. That was just a taste. I think this Crusade stuff, the Flashpoint system that's built into these White Dwarfs is awesome. I think it's really great.
Okay, I don't want to derail us too much, but I would like you two to sell me on Crusade. I know very little about it, apart from the general, the fundamentals. There's an ongoing thing. You build up your guys as you go and you get stuff, but literally sell me. I know a lot of me and my more competitive friends would love to do this kind of stuff, but we just can't seem to get the energy to learn what feels like a whole new rule set. Well, can either of you guys boil it down to a couple of minutes of here,
Yes.
Adam, this is why you need to play this?
I'll do it in a heartbeat, man. All right. Do you like playing video games RPG-ish where you level up, you have your own character, you build it up, and it continues and progresses, and you have all the flavor control of this story in a world that you love? Do you like that kind of deal in a video game?
Yes, I had a Thunder Fury, if that says it for you.
Yep. So that's...
I lost 5 years of my life to World of Warcraft. Continue.
This is that on the tabletop. This is our 40k game turned into that. It is so once there's actually a lot of tools that people have come out with that are out there. There's a great website. There's administratum.net actually has it where you can build all your cards into it and you just keep track of it as you go along. There's a Excel spreadsheet that's out there that's shared by Goonhammer and everything. Just great little tools that really reduce all that bookkeeping that you're kind of talking about, that system behind the system kind of deal. Yeah. That really allows you to appreciate, you get to focus on what you really want to focus on when you're doing the Crusade deal. The administratum.net, when I play it, my Catacomb Command Barge, Necron Overlord, he killed this many units, he did this. Because he's participated in 3 battles, according to the Necron Codex, he has 3 of these awesome, cool titles, Butcher of the Defiant Stars, Lord of the Heavens, Rupturing Heavens, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, he gets more abilities. And so they don't necessarily discourage named characters. You can bring named characters, but they don't get to level up in the same way. They do have some added benefits, of course, because they come built in. But you get to take a Space Marine captain or an Orc war boss or a Necron overlord, and they are. I mean, you get to make them into all sorts of stuff. I mean, it is. I've had so much fun with it, and I'm really glad that my local community is buying into it to the degree that they're all on board. Where the website I use allows you to like build a league where everybody can go in and look at everybody else's battle cards, and you can see all their lore bits and everything they put in there. And to be fair, so we use points. Some people are they're like, oh well, power levels, whatnot. No, like you can still use points. And I admit, like I'm using some not necessarily like pure meta driven competitive orientation in my list building. I'm trying to build up. I've got first phalanx, second phalanx, the technomancer who's responsible for them. I've got it's really cool and the directions that it goes. And there's some really great Paul, before the show we were talking about Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that. I mean, this has so many tie-ins to those kind of systems that, again, like make your own character, lead your own force, and your forces level up too. It's not just about the characters. Your units. I play against one guy. He's got Black Templar, and he's like giving him +1 weapon skill. Like imagine assault intercessors with +1 weapon skill, right? Yeah. No, it's great, and I love it, and we're having a great time, and I highly recommend you give it a whirl. And if you need any help, I will gladly provide some tools that'll make it a little easier on you, so you don't have to churn through it. It did take a little experimentation, and there is kind of a deal. Some of the stuff you can, if anybody tries hard enough, they can break a game, right? So there's always a.
I mean, I don't think you need to overanalyze it. I mean, I think that it's a system, right? and he said, but you said it perfectly. Like I got. If Red didn't sell you on it, I'm not going to. I think he said it the best, and I think that also, like some people, they just prefer, I like a little column A. I like my lore. I like a little column B. I like cool unit. I like them to look neat. And then a little column C. I like some awesome stats.
Oh yeah.
Yep. Some people need more in one column than the other to do this. And
I wonder if we're going to get to a stage with statistics where we can actually have people. Did you see that the meta focus competitive article Nick Nanavati did, where they had his like stats bar?
Oh yeah.
I wonder how long it'll be before we get to that, where Paul will have the Paul Murphy stats bar, and it'll be like 40% narrative, 25%, and then at the bottom, and the bottom bar is just like 99.9%, and it's got Blood Angels next to it.
That's right. But see, when we're building our models, we talk about this a lot. Where you're imagining them doing these things. They're really they're jumping over that rock and popping off a couple of bolter rounds, and right center mass on that Guardian or the Eldar Guardian over there. You're imagining this, and this is another way to play it out. And think about it this way: we were talking about like the origin and then progression of Gaz in our last segment. I mean, he basically was RPing. He's role playing. He crusaded it, from his 2 knives, 2 stick bombs, and a knife up to his mega armor and power claw.
He sure did.
And lacking, that's true. That's how it all worked out. And so, but again, it is a system. So it's going to develop over time. There are some things that it may not scratch the itch completely for everyone, but I think it's just another way to really enjoy the game. And it also gives that little bit of connective tissue, that meat in between games that some people may appreciate more than the other stuff. Then, like some people, they're in between games, their models are just sitting on the shelf. Some people, in order to get that motivation to put them on the table again, they might enjoy thinking that their models are over there doing push-ups or whatever and getting their +1 strength through weapon skill.
Yeah. I mean, I remember I saw a really cool, this is ages ago, by the way. I saw a really cool, was it Triumph and Treachery? What was the progressive thing for fantasy years and years and years ago?
So yeah, Triumph and Treachery was the campaign system there at the end of 8th edition for fantasy. Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember a bunch of my mates, they had they'd been playing it for a while before me. I just joined in a little bit towards the end with my hodgepodge orcs army, which had like a bunch of boar riders, which were awful, but I loved them. And a big brick of like archer night goblins who were just like there to march up to you and like release the fanatics. It was hilarious. Always a good time. But they had like magnetized commanders. Every single one of their characters had magnetized arms and sometimes gut plates for ogres and stuff. And as they killed guys, they'd get more bling added or less, or they'd get upgraded and downgraded. That kind of stuff is incredible in our space, in our game.
I agree, 100%. It's awesome. I highly recommend people check it out. Not just that, we've looked at using the open war cards. I don't know if you guys have looked at those, but they have like 12 deployment zones, 6 regular ones, 6 like crazy ones where you start like right next to each other essentially. Some of them, but there's these things that if you play a game and you are if you're under half of the other person. So Adam, you bring 2,000 points. I bring 1,000 points. I get what's called a sudden death card, which is like if I complete the conditions on this sudden death card, I automatically win, being the underdog.
Yep.
And it's just so cool. Like I kill your warlord, I win. Like game's over.
Well, it's always been a fun, interesting part of the game. For me, because like when people conceptualize a fair game, you have the same amount of points. How often in history has there been like the same amount of units on each side? It's always a discrepancy. There's always an imbalance. Like, Hannibal, who, from Carthage, who invaded Rome and did so well. Crap load of elephants,
Yep.
Just like, hey man, I'm going to bring an OP amount of elephants. Deal with it. It's very rare that there's a truly balanced and pitched battlefield. And I always find that an interesting thing. So that is really cool. They've worked that in. They've worked in the fact that, hey, people's collections aren't created equal, but we want you to be able to play with them anyway.
Yep, absolutely. It's
awesome. On a slightly different point is that there are 8 in the Necron Codex that I'm looking at right now. I'm looking at the Marines. There are 8 pages devoted to Crusade, so it is supported. And where this is just something that was on the individual player. It's like your homebrew campaign. It's very difficult to discuss your homebrew campaign with other people.
Right.
But now you've all got at least a little bit more of a common language of when you're describing it, which would mean you're going to encounter more people that want to do this. And I think so. If you're worried about not finding folks that want to do it or may play along with you, I think that'll be less of a challenge in the future.
Agreed. 100%.
I like it that it's empowering the role play elements of our hobby as well. It's been forever we've had like all the D&D-esque role play books, which is just being some of the times just feel like, oh yeah, we're playing spicy D&D here. We're playing D&D. We're playing D&D in the setting of 40k, which is cool. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's cool to bring that into the game that already exists. We have Warhammer as a tabletop game, and let's add RP elements. Let's add story building elements, character building elements to what already exists. And I think that's been something that GW's always tried to do. And I hope this is it. I hope this is the one that sinks home and continues, because a lot of these have come and gone over the years.
It's got a structure, and again, it's supported in the codexes. It's supported in the basically everything. You can get further support from it, I'm sure, through White Dwarf. It's going to be something that at least persists through this edition. I mean, I feel confident in saying that.
The flashpoints they have, hey, if you're doing a crusade, here's some other stuff you can do to tag onto it. That was in the last White Dwarf. And then I also got, a couple weeks ago, they released the Beyond the Veil Crusade book, which is essentially if you wanted to do a crusade in a war zone of the Pariah Nexus. And so there's a whole other mechanic to how you play Crusade in that environment. Because if you're not the Necrons, you're like trying to figure out what the Necrons are doing. And if you are the Necrons, you've got a little bit of a leg up because it's essentially your home turf. And it's just some cool stuff that you can add in.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense as well. Like thematically, of course, the Necrons are going to have the advantage. They'll have like more reinforcements, or they'll have better emplacements or defenses than they would have normally.
Right. Yeah.
I'm going to call 2 shots in this episode. We might as well go ahead and talk about them now.
Oof.
This conversation has inspired me. I wasn't going to mention this, but FTN, we're going to produce some Crusade content.
Oh, snap.
It's going to be fun. That's the first shot. The second shot is going to revolutionize the hobby game. I'm being dramatic. No. So something coming up, we do the hobby segment. It's been a little less frequent than it normally is, but the finishing move segment, to where we talk about how to spend 5 or so. You've got a painted model. You've got your battle ready model. How do you then, show off some bling with it, stress yourself, pick up another skill to add to your repertoire, so it's easier to make a whole army look better the next time you go at it. finishing moves. Going to start doing some videos around those. Teamed up with Oscar Lars. Stuff coming from Oscar. He's been on the show before. Friend of mine, amazing painter, and we're going to be doing some finishing moves segments.
He's not just an amazing painter. He's an actual painter. Yeah, he's not just a hobbyist, right?
Trained.
Yeah,
and like college level type. Training.
Like not just the Duncan Rhodes School of YouTube videos. No, sorry, and I'm saying that from the G-Dub ones, not whatever he's doing now, which is probably incredible.
Hey, don't knock YouTube University, man. It's,
me either, man. Dude, it taught me everything I know, baby. Like,
every practical thing I've used in the last several years.
Yeah.
How do I do this without electrocuting myself? But doing that, going to start doing some finishing moves, going to start slowing that. But we're also going to start, I don't know what the name of this segment's going to be yet, but we're going to do something to where we review listener-submitted models if they want feedback on how to do, how to either get better. So you're going to get like an actual pro's advice if you want it on how to make your model look nicer. And then I'm going to chime in some thoughts about if you're wanting paint points. If you want painting points, this is what you might want to improve on your model, or tell you that you're fine. That, hey, look, you got all the points. Be proud of it. Move on.
I'm imagining like a Shark's Den, Kitchen Nightmares, Gordon Ramsay style thing here. Like, where Paul's like the Gordon Ramsay. It's raw. What is this? You think this is a coat of paint? Do it again. Yeah, it's exactly what's going to happen.
No, this will be people that are actually asking for it, and we're going to do it in our conversational style, and with an eye towards honesty, of course, but also accomplishing whatever goal that they say they want to accomplish and how it's submitted. So that's coming. If anyone would like their model to be put into this, please let us know. We're not just going to pull random models off the internet. We're not going to do this without people's permission, that kind of stuff. But it's coming, and I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be real fun.
For all those who don't know, Paul coerced Red and I into being part of this venture.
So, hey, can you send me some pics and be cool with what I say?
Yeah, we're like, maybe.
Too late, I got the pics.
Yeah, he didn't really tell us what they were for. He's like, it's just some stuff, some things. No, he didn't tell us what it was for. We're just joking.
Oh, but speaking of models, Red, you've painted or at least you're most of the way painted your Silent King, and it looks amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I mean, since I got the model, outside of my efforts with work and everything, that has been one of my main focuses, besides, of course, my loving family.
Your family is the Silent King and his two cronies now.
Man, I tell you what, though, it was a real adventure. I loved it. You got to see it. I guess we could probably post it up, Paul, afterwards. But I just got to base him now, and I've got a really good idea with how I'm going to base him. But that aside, man, so putting this thing together, I looked at it real quick, and if you've seen if you looked at the model at any depth, it has like multiple layers of it. I mean, it's tall, right? It's very tall, and I essentially kept it apart in about 11 components as I got to it, and I primed it with contrast. I put contrast over it to get all the base paint on there. I used some Turbo Dork metallics to help kind of get the shine up on my red. So my scheme is like skeleton Necrons. I mean, yeah, okay, I got it. But I'm talking like bone color skeletons, and not metal necessarily, but the red armor though is supposed to have kind of this metallic-ish look to it. And so between that and then also I used the new, Paul, I've heard you before, the camo shade.
Mm-hmm.
However, I would say a successor to it, at least in regards of Necrons, is Cryptek Armor Shade Gloss.
Okay. I haven't used it. That's the new one, right?
That's the new one. It is thick. Like, yeah, it is. It definitely, when you put it on, it goes on for sure. You don't, make sure that you're thinning appropriately, and build up, because I kind of thought it was going to be like a glossy Agrax to a certain degree, maybe with a little more shine or metallic to it, but no, it ended up being, I mean, it was, it's.
Oh, that's probably. Is that the first time you used it? That's brave, putting it on the.
No, I actually had a test model. I was working on a Necron off to the side, and I when you get a Catacomb Command Barge, for all you fellow Overlords out there, you get that. There's always those little wards that come with it. If you're making an Annihilation Barge, you end up having extra Necron characters. And so I tested it on him. That was my test run. And he got the full full treatment. And I tell you what, you talk about the YouTube University, between Army Painter and some of Duncan Rhodes' stuff. Like those videos took me to task, and I think it really helped out.
Nice. Yeah, I don't want to take us too far on the side. We actually are going to talk about orcs, and specifically I want to talk about Commandos.
Oh, man.
I think Commandos are one of those things to me that they kind of scream orc, because I love like Snickrot's pose. And we're not going to talk about Snickrot specifically, but he's got that. He's like, he's got his finger under his lips like he's trying to be quiet, telling everybody to be quiet while he sneaks up on you.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the Artel miniature comics that they have?
I don't know.
Man, it's a cool little hobby thing that they've got where it essentially follows these orcs and a commissar with some Imperial Guard, but the orcs are all Commandos, and it's awesome. I mean, it's so, in fact, the new White Dwarf kind of talks about orcs in general, how like orcs are really goofy, right? Like we laugh about them like teleporting themselves into like actual into walls and stuff like that, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. But in reality, they're still Xenos. They're still these like big green monsters that commit, acts of war regularly. And so the Commandos in that comic are just really cool to watch. I mean, there's like a sniper, they're smarter, you kind of give it that the sneaky and orcs don't necessarily seem to go together until you see Commandos in play.
Especially not these guys either, because they've got way more equipment than look, we have to suspend disbelief when like a Space Marine is supposed to be stealthy. Like a Space Marine in full on power armor is supposed to basically be able to disappear in plain sight.
Yeah.
And we see that play out, even now with like the Phobos Marines. They're 9-foot tall human beings in bright blue or red armor, yellow armor in some cases, and they just appear out of nowhere.
Yeah, supposedly camouflaged. I love that stuff.
But I think
that bright blue guy on the beach. I just can't make him out right now from 12 inches away.
You go one step further with the orcs, who are they're giant green monsters, but then they're just like bristling with all this superfluous equipment. Shovels, giant guns, smaller goblins riding on their backs with lit dynamite.
Yeah.
Like
sneaky.
all this stuff, but yet somehow they are also sneaky. So I think they kind of scream orc. Yeah, that's it.
They believe.
I think these are one of the scream. Now they're not on the Flash Gets level of screaming orc or on the Luda level of screaming orc, but people know what Ludas and Flash Gets do. I want to talk about Commandos.
Good. I don't feel like they get enough love, and I feel like they're actually really good this edition as well.
Now, why are you saying that? Is it because they're bonus to cover save essentially, or
it's because of the deep strike, I guess. It's because they have the ability to deploy anywhere on the board at 9 inches away, and then they have a fairly reliable a charge as you can get without getting plus to charge from reserve. But on top of that, they get you points. They're point getter units. They get you points. I mean, you can take it. You don't need to take them as Death Skulls to do this, but you can take them as Death Skulls and they become OBSEC. And so you can, one turn you can use all your firepower, whatever you've got, to clear an objective in your opponent's backfield that they can't get back to because you're swamping them with boys. And the next turn you jump some Commandos onto it, and all of a sudden, it's your objective. That kind of stuff. On top of that, there's like scramblers and engagement or fronts. They're just really good for jumping down, doing a little bit of pinch hitting work, and just securing you points, which I feel like is something the orcs need to do. They've got all this ability to put pressure on, but I feel like if you double down on the swamping them or the doing what orcs do, you're not going to be banking on a reliable amount of points game in, game out. Taking like 200 points of Commandos guarantees you're going to end up with those 200 points of Commandos. They guaranteed you 25 extra points at the end of the game, guaranteed it. So I feel like that's very powerful. Being able to know you're going to get reliable points is power in a matchup.
Agreed. And really, like, out of everything else you've got in an orc list, it's another one of those dilemmas. Like, are you the person playing against the orcs? Do you have enough to handle what the orc is throwing at you in your face? And can you react to Commandos coming out of nowhere to score more objectives?
Yeah.
That's and on top of that, they seem to be fairly cheap as well. So like a unit of 5 Commandos with that. Now, look, this, you can get fancy with war gear and stuff like that, but 45 points.
Yeah, I think they're only 1 or 2 more points than a boy, and you get all this extra. You get the deep strike, you get the extra cover, which admittedly doesn't make a huge amount of difference. You are still an orc, going from a 6 up to what? It'll be a 4 up in cover. If someone still wants to kill you, they're probably going to get it done.
They will, but I think anytime you influence that die on something that needs it. So, when you're using, you've got your I don't know, your paper plate tied to your chest or whatever, and so you never expect to make an armor save. And you live that way. You play that way. I mean, in your mind, I'm going to never make an armor save. And then when you make 3 or 4 of them, you're like, whoa, my game is different now.
Yep. I love that paper plate held up to your chest. That's great. On top of that, like you take them as death skulls, they do get an invuln, so you know you're always going to get a save. That's pretty great as well. Now, apart from them being, I think, a very useful unit for where orcs are at the moment, I think their models are some of the best. I don't know how you guys feel about them, but I think their models are incredible.
They are incredible. They're the fine cast, though, sir. They're not the plastic. I think you can get a lot of mileage out of kind of cobbling together your own. You get some of the fine cast and then do a little bit of cobbling, and you add real character flavor.
Are they still selling the Forge World upgrade kit for the Commandos? Because I was a huge fan of that. I'll just have a quick look at while you guys keep chatting.
I believe that they are. At least it has been in recent memory. It exists.
Because that was a fantastic kit. You get different heads, different backpacks, and then you can make a knob that just looks so cool.
So the full stats on these guys, 3+ weapon skill, 5+ BS, which that's Orky, but then 2 attacks apiece, which I know that's the standard Orc profile, but we're already talking about being closer. So, and I do think you want smaller units. I think you want to have, if you're taking these and you've got the slots, you may want, 3-4 units of 5-6 orcs.
Like a true infiltration unit, right? Like, I mean, there's something to be said for economy of force, right? How many points you sink into them, and then really the footprint that you're going to make, especially with people using infiltrators and such to control the board. You might not be able to fit in that bigger unit if you take them. And then you're also, again, going back to that dilemma with 5 models. Is 5 models worth putting your firepower into when the rest of the orc army is coming at you?
Oh, right.
Yep.
Yeah. Where are you going to fire that Punisher cannon?
Yeah, exactly right. You've only got 40 shots. You can definitely kill these 5 guys, or you can take out, 15, 16 of that 30-man.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
I think they're a crazy good unit. I mean, you can give them power. You can give power core, a big chopper on the knob. You can put burners in the unit. I'm not quite sure how good the burners are these days, but it is a power weapon in combat, close combat. Is it -2 or -3 in combat? Which, it converts well into Space Marine wounds you're taking out on the charge.
It's -2 in combat. So
yeah,
it adds
I'm of
up.
the opinion you keep them cheap and cheerful. Maybe add a claw or a big chopper on the knob, just in case you do make that 9-inch charge out of reserve. You're going to get some work done when you get there. Especially if Space Marines or multi-wound stuff is a thing in your meta. I feel like just a big chopper is a great way to go.
The knob adds another wound to the unit.
Exactly.
Not so if you're paying points per wound, you can look at this is one of the ways you can look at it. The knob is cheaper than if you were to buy 2 Commandos.
Yeah, exactly right. Great way of looking at it. And he'll do more damage when you get there with any other weapon.
But I don't know if you want to go Power Claw on him.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to go Power Claw either. I feel like hitting on 4s just holds you back. You're already a pinch hitting unit. You're not a hammer unit. I mean, Mega Knobs can afford to hit on 4s because you'll take a minimum of 3 of them, which get like 12 attacks on the charge. So the 4s will even out across the spread. But when you're only throwing 3 or 4 dice on a 4s, it kind of just falls apart a little bit. I'm at the same dilemma with my intercessor squads as well. I'm just taking 5-man intercessor squads. Do I want to actually take a fist or a thunderhammer? Because like at best I get 2, like on average I get 2 hits out of it. It's a weird dilemma with that one. I feel like it's just a flavor.
It's different when you're an intercessor. You got 3+ armor save.
That's true. That's true.
You got 2 wounds.
You're going to survive the hit again a lot more of the time.
Yeah, more often. But I know you mentioned the burners, but they could also have the option to get a big shooter.
Yep, which is just an old heavy bolter now. It's not 2 damage. I wonder if they will get 2 damage.
They haven't so far.
If they don't get 2 damage, I hope they get more shots just to compensate.
Let me say, Red, I played against Zerkers, not to on a side, but Zerkers this past weekend, and when they go to 2 wounds,
yeah,
it's going to be rough.
Yeah. It's a different world, man.
Real rough. But yeah, Big Shoot is still 30, but it's 36-inch range. So I guess where I'm going with that is if you were to, let's say you push everything in your Orc force up and you need something to come in from the backfield on turn 2 that you want to be distracting your opponents with, or your main force is the actual distraction from you making points like you were talking about in the backfield. They could still do something if they had a 36-inch weapon.
Yeah, that's true. Because there are games. There's games with only 4 objectives and missions. Yeah, and your opponent's going to be deep in on his. It's very unlikely you're ever going to be able to deep strike and charge onto them. So maybe you are just better off just chucking him and like turn 2 deep striking them into your own backfield while you push up literally everything else you've got to swamp theirs.
Or let's say, you're doing the battle wagons like we were talking about. That's a lot of points and a lot of things in these tin cans, and you're going to be wanting to move them forward. You're going to need some smaller point. You're going to need that 45-point investment to come back and win the game for you.
Well, see, I'm actually a big fan of taking a relatively expensive gunship, and then putting very cheap things inside it. Because the one way to make sure your gunboat dies is to have expensive things inside of your expensive gunboat. 100%, they got to kill it,
And
when
they
you
will.
Put
They probably will.
When you put innocuous, seemingly harmless things, especially MSU-style things, inside of a relatively durable gun platform, and you've got other things of more threatening nature, you just got to be like, oh, cool, I'm going to get 3 turns out of this battle wagon, and it's going to drop off 2 or 3 5-man OBSEC units on the way through. That's cool.
That's a great way of looking at it. I mean, as the third-party objector here, Red, what do you think about that? Do you pack in, like, is it better to have a heavy fist inside of a mailed gauntlet, or
it's mailed already? Doesn't matter. Yeah.
Okay.
No, but part of that, I mean, I'd say for everybody, because I mean, I can tell you we're going crazy with and I don't mean to sidetrack, but and when you're looking at how you apply yourself to a meta, it very much goes with who you're playing with more frequently, because sometimes it might be that you can spread it out versus going for a more direct attack kind of deal where you weight everything into a couple units or a forward advance while you've got a little bit ankle biters here or there. And so I know that sounds like a cop-out answer up front, but in reality, I mean, for example, you need what to do what in regards of, I mean, you've talked about this before a while back, Adam, the effect, right? It's not so much about the unit in this case, it's about the effect that you want to achieve.
Yep.
And I'll go with, I mean, there's sometimes where if you can get enough of that effect up front with that iron fist, shock and awe, that whole tactic approach, that you can just tilt your opponent. And after that, if you've got all the utility behind it, there's a lot to that. But, going into what to give with the Commandos and everything, I'd probably go back to just their effect of trying to get those extra secondaries and being a frustration for the enemy. I probably wouldn't, unless it was something like, I've got 1970 points or something like that, and I need to tag a little bit here or there. If the other guys don't have it, I think that's probably how I would go about it initially. From that approach, I guess.
And from my point of view, it depends what you're taking them for. If you do want them to be a harassing unit, I would say they need something more than just their choppers to get the job done. But if you if you are just taking them to get you those scrambler points, to get you those behind enemy lines points, or engage in all fronts, don't invest points in things you care about. You care about losing. Like, you don't care about losing, I'm the same with like Scion units, yeah? As soon as I start putting 2 plasma guns and a plasma pistol on a 5-man Scion unit, I've added like 40% of their points
tripled their cost.
Yeah, I've tripled their value to me. I don't want them to die anymore. And that goes counterintuitive to why I put them in my list in the first place.
That's right.
So yeah, just have a realistic viewpoint on what you wanted to do. And I love what you said about tilting your opponent, Red. You heard it here first, guys. If you play against Red and you tilt it, it's because you meant it. But no, I think I get what you were meaning. You're meaning like you're forcing a change in perspective from your opponent. Like, you're forcing their hand. You're saying, hey, you have to divert your attention from what you wanted to do to what I want you to do. And,
absolutely.
Yeah, perfectly said.
I actually agree, Adam, when you said that about having multiple small things in there. I agree with you, because we play a very deadly game. Like, it's you think of the biggest, baddest model that doesn't have some kind of like you can't shoot me rule like a character or whatever. Like, it's going to be killed if your opponent decides they want to kill it.
Yeah,
and they brought a reasonable.
Not Gaston. It cannot. You cannot allow it to exist and have any reasonable expectation that you'll win the game. That kind of stuff is what we're talking about. But when you have things that are like a couple of tiers down from that, things like battle wagons, things like regular repulsors, maybe land raiders, if you're so inclined, things that do put out a reasonable amount of firepower, but they're not, that your opponent thinks they might be able to win if they're still alive at the end. But if you get that battle wagon and you stack it full of mega knobs, they're like, well, obviously I need to kill it now because it's twice what it appears to be.
They're making all these value calls, like, okay, if I kill it, then the mega knobs are over there. If I
Exactly.
don't kill it, then I may have slowed it down, so it's still a turn off or whatever. You've made the decisions. This is something, it's like any time when your opponent just has there's only one decision.
Yeah.
then
and you make the call for them. Well, you don't want to. You want to leave them questioning. And just having like 15 commandos inside a battle wagon, especially a battle wagon kitted for bear, kitted to go ram into people and stuff like that. They're gonna be like, I don't need to take care of that right now. And so it's gonna get to them. It's gonna get closer. It's gonna get halfway across the board because it's not like packing kill cannons and all that stuff. And so, it's going to get to move. And as soon as it moves once, those commandos are so much nearer to being what they wanted to do,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So with an average of point increase that we see in the edition, and that there's some amount of fewer models on the table. It means there are fewer guns on the table. It's still a very lethal edition. But when you can overload your opponents, you've got them making some threat priority decisions. They may not fire at these 5-man units.
Right. Yep. I mean, that's just like you said. I mean, getting them to prioritize, getting them to think about it, and what I like to call, again, sitting here looking at 20-man units of Necron warriors and everything, there's very little target diffusion there, and that's I would argue an intended mechanic for them. But with the commandos, by spreading out across those smaller units, and this goes with a lot of armies with different, you mentioned the scions, that target diffusion, right? By essentially overloading, threat overload on their target priority, it really makes a huge difference in mindsets.
Well, at the very start of 8th edition, I know a lot of the ultra competitive guys coming from 7th that I was playing with at the end in Australia, they were talking about how they just had the perception that high, like say the D6 damage weapons or multi-damage weapons were just bad. Because we were leaving a horde meta with things like the Barkstar, the rest in peace, rest in, I don't know, turmoil, thing. But we were coming from that meta where there was legitimately like hundreds of models on the table and it was just very ugly and unfun. But they were just like, oh, well, if we just keep playing with just single wound models, everybody who puts any amount of points into multi-damage weapons has just wasted their points. You take 20 las cannons, you might as well have taken 20 bolters against if your opponent's playing nothing but bloodletters, for example.
Correct. Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so that's exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. Diffusion, threat diffusion. Like if you control because you can do that, that's a way that you can control the efficiency of your opponent. And then if you add things like -1 to hit, e.g. like termagants, this is the concept of this gaunt carpet. That's what that does. It controls your opponent's efficiency, not through changing the parameters of what they're shooting, apart from the -1 to hit maybe a catalyst or whatever, but saying that no matter what you shoot, no matter how much you shoot of it, you're only killing this profile.
Well, doesn't matter. That's your bust up, right? Like I'm gonna take 120 guard models and or plague bearers, plague bearers are a little different because you're gonna typically put those in bigger squads, but we'll say Tzench, right? You make small units. I'm gonna put 3 units of 10 guard models on each objective. So which one do you want to get rid of first?
Yeah, exactly. Where do you want to start your very hard climb up this hill?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, no. I don't mind them, and I think that there could be a place for them. It really, I mean, you hit. I think you nailed it in the very beginning. Is that they are just good at scoring points, and maybe your opponent will realize that. But again, then they've got to still do something. They still have to do something about them.
Yep.
Well, I'd love an MSU. Well, sorry, orcs have this cool ability to not just go MSU. I mean, a lot of armies they don't have a choice at the moment. Harlequins MSU, well, most of Eldar actually, to really do well in this edition, have to lean into the MSU things, or even the mechanized, like a bunch of wave serpents, etc. Guard can't really do MSU. Scions can, Guard can't. But orcs have this weird ability to do both. 3 times 5 commandos, 3 times 5 storm boys, 3 times 3 bikers. Or the bikers come in 5s.
Yeah.
Can't remember. And then you can still take 120 boys, and you're playing both sides of the coin. You got the horde element, you got the MSU element, Can you afford to kill the storm boys? Probably not, Probably not. Maybe the commandos get done, maybe the bikers get done, and the boys, most of them get dead, but maybe the commandos squeak through, or the storm boys squeak through that game, or whatnot. And I just feel like that's a really cool way of playing. On top of that, one thing I never like a feeling of is at the end of the game, in like the bottom of the innings, bottom of the nines or whatever they call it in baseball, having no resources left, like not having the ability to make a play. I feel like if you just take squads, you just take squads upon squads upon squads, you can always make a play at the primary, and therefore always feel like you got some agency.
Oh, that's a great point. That is, I think the orcs struggle a bit, like with their stratagems. Like I think some of the units are kind of like underserviced as far as like stratagem support goes.
Well, they just got left. They just got left. So they got these rolling nerfs towards the end of 8th. They got like nerf to looters, nerf to the combining of squads, nerf to Mordaka, and then Vigilus got taken away, which was their big keystone player was that shock attack gun that could just spike and go off at the drop of a hat. And then they didn't get a lot of agency. They didn't get a lot of love in their Psychic Awakening. Like they didn't have another feather added to their cap playstyle wise in that Psychic Awakening. Like apart from the headbutt burner bomber, which is a meme. It's a horrible meme. It's so brutal when it goes off. But it is a meme. It's a one-trick wonder. Everyone knows what it does when they see it on your list. Unlike, you think about what Grey Knights got, what AdMech got. AdMech, they had a complete paradigm shift. They had a complete fundamental change in the way they wanted to build their armies and the way they wanted to play the game. Orcs didn't. Orcs stayed relatively the same. And they didn't get taken to another level. So I feel like these changes have to add something. Like there's got to be I'm not sure.
Well, I think your choices in list, like because you have less of those things to fall back on, you've got to be thinking about how do I attack the mission, and maybe a little bit less about how you attack the opponent. I mean, you got that in there, right? But you're an orc is an orc, like you said. You could have 90, 120 boys, whether that be 9 units of 10 or 12 units of 10, or dice up however you want, and then you could still be doing this other stuff. And if they do, I mean, again, if they ignore one element or the other, you have the still potential to draw it out. But I think that's where the Commandos fit in really well. Is that I don't want to say they're a do nothing unit. They're going to win games, and you don't have to invest a lot of you're not taking away from your primary thing that much, whatever that primary thing is.
Yeah, well said.
There you go, guys. That's all I want to talk about this time. I know we covered a lot. Yeah,
got in, got done, got out.
We jumped a bit. So yeah, I mean, I don't, Red. We did. I played against some Berserkers, all World Eaters this past weekend. It was a bloody game. It came down to, I think, Mephiston and one Intercessor was the only thing left on the table.
Nice.
Blood for the blood god.
Yeah.
I played a game using my Dark Angels verse. My mate who was using a guard list that I've been working on. And man, the guard touched me up pretty bad.
Yeah.
Everyone's all going on about Inner Circle breaking the game and stuff. Demolisher cannons don't care. Manticores don't care. Like they just, it's crazy.
We'll have to hear about. So next week, let's talk about the guard battle against the orcs in Armageddon.
Round this baby out, because that's the last week of Orktober, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. Well, that's like the most famous, biggest, best orc battlefront war, whatever you want to call it.
We got Saga the Beast we can talk about too, which is
man, that's a good one.
Yeah.
It's not as cool.
It's pretty cool.
There's no Yarick. There's no Black Templars. Can't be as cool. Sorry.
There's Black Templars. I think there's Black Templars in there because
Black Templars.
Yeah.
I'll shut my big mouth. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, it goes into the like the ecclesiarchy stuff, and
it's kind of how a lot of that stuff kickstarts.
Yeah.
Really good story stuff.
So that you might learn something the next couple of weeks.
You might. You guys will have to learn me something.
Well, gentlemen, thank you all for joining me. We'll see y'all next week.
See ya.
See you then.
Make my day.